Thank you very much. Thank you. So as a child, I got out in nature quite a bit, climbing out on trees, taking my brother and my next-door neighbors on hikes together. We all went all over the place. Through pastures, through fields, climbing down into sandstone ravines. And of course, while we were out in nature, we were always looking for wildlife. All kinds of things, from frogs and toads, and well, maybe not everybody loves snakes, but we love finding things like this eastern fox snake, or this giant black rat snake. Now, when I was a child, I developed this love of nature. I developed a love of snakes, too. Now, maybe not everybody loves snakes, but I didn't really realize as a child that not everybody had a chance to develop a love of nature. Things are different for many people, different from the way things were for me. The world is full of all kinds of industrialization, urbanization, cities, built environments, not a chance to explore nature. But I'm fortunate to have had a chance in my upbringing, as well as through corporate sponsorship, to be able to get out and enjoy nature. So I want to thank Sigma for helping me get out and connect people to nature through photography, as well as my additional sponsors. And I also want to thank my parents, Mick and Judy FitzSimmons, who got me out into nature so much as a child. Now, I think we all know that time in nature is a thing that helps us feel better. But studies have found that this is in fact true, that being in close contact with nature is beneficial. For example, the research shows that if you get outside and walk, just a walk in the park or in the woods, that walk can make you less depressed. Take away your tension. You'll be less angry, not as fatigued, less confusion. Now compare that to walking in a built environment like an indoor shopping center, where people feel more depressed, or at least they feel no change in depression. Consider this research. If you gaze on a forest scene for just 20 minutes, it can reduce your stress. Now that may not be surprising, but you might be surprised to know that it doesn't have to just be a natural scene in which you are actually present. It can be photographs. You can stare at a photograph of the forest for 20 minutes, and that will reduce your stress. In fact, as you sit during this 20-minute talk, I hope that you find, as you look at my pictures of nature, that your stress is reduced. Now consider this, recreation as well. Get out camping, hiking, boating, like this canoeist here in Adirondack Mountains in New York. That can also help reduce stress. Speaking of stress, think about the most stressful movie that you ever watched. Maybe it was something like The Clockwork Orange or an Alfred Hitchcock movie. Researchers had subjects watch a stressful movie, and then afterward, they watched a clip of either a natural setting or an urban setting. And the results are similar to what we've looked at so far. There was greater stress recovery among those people who watched the clips of natural settings than urban settings. So we can see that looking at nature, and not just being out and experiencing nature, which is great, but actually seeing photography, images of nature can be helpful. So I ask you, sit back for a minute and watch these pictures of nature and see how you feel. Monitor your affective response. How do you feel when you look at this autumn scene, the reflections in the water here east of Fairbanks, Alaska in the fall? Or sunrise along the northern California coast as the waves crash in, the gulls squawking along the coast. How does it make you feel to listen to a babbling brook, here a cascade in Ontario, Canada? Or think about this sunrise picture. How does it make you feel as you look at Mount Sneffels and the sunrise, the fall foliage outside Telluride, Colorado? Or one more image. Go with me to the Chafalaya Basin, the Henderson Swamp at sunrise. How do these images make you feel? Is your stress being reduced? Do you feel a little bit better? The research suggests that most of you in the house and watching here will feel that way. But things are different today. And they're different for kids, and that's the area that I work in. I try to connect children with nature. We've got a world that is increasingly full of built environments, urban and cosmopolitan locations where children don't get a chance to experience nature. So I've made it my goal to connect more and more children with nature like I did when I was a child. And so I want to share with you in my field, which is children's literature, an interesting study. They took 70 years of Caldecott Award winners. Now, the Caldecott Award is the top award in children's literature. And for example, they looked at the major environment types in those books. So here you see that solid line are built environments. And they are steadily increasing over the period 1938 to 2008. Yet, natural environments, as the major environment type, is dropping at an approximately equal rate. Or look at this. These are any type of environment, not just the major type, but any environment. Again, you see built environments over that 70-year period increasing steadily. And interestingly, around the time that the environmental movement started to take off in the late 60s and 70s, there's actually a precipitous drop-off in the presence of natural environments. Or one more statistic from this study. Animals present in these books, either domestic or wild animals, and we see that they are declining as well. Now, we could ask whether this is a result of the judges or the books entered in the competition, but nonetheless, if you walk into a library and you look for these award-winning books, this suggests what you're going to see. And I think this is symptomatic of a larger trend in our society, and that is children not having the opportunities to connect with nature. And so I use that love of nature that is inherent in children, and I try to connect them with animals. Research shows that children as young as 90% of their dreams can be about animals. And so I help connect them with birds and insects, frogs, toads, salamanders, dragonflies, you name it. I try to bring them in contact with animals. And so I've made it my mission to help connect children with nature through animals. So about 5 years ago, the director of the Sigma Pro program, Dave Metz, said to me, I have an idea. Now, at the time, I was working on 2 writing projects. I was working on this article for Popular Photography using light tents to photograph wildflowers out in the field. And at the same time, I was writing a book for Kent State University Press titled Animals of Ohio's Ponds and Vernal Pools. And so I was out in the field with my light tent, setting it up over top of things like the Virginia bluebells. And at the same time, I was catching animals during my research, like this wood frog. And Dave said to me, why don't you put those little animals, those critters, into your light tent, and we'll run an ad campaign. So my project started as a very small project. It was to take some animals and put them inside my light tent. And so here's a gray tree frog in the light tent, and this turned into the first ad that we ran on the inside cover of Outdoor Photographer magazine. Now I tell you this because this project started fairly small. It was photographing a few animals at a local nature center, but it started to take off. We saw the benefits of this type of photography. It was pretty cool how the animals would stand out against the white background. So I started traveling with my light tent, my lights, and photographing animals all over. Here I am at the Alaska Sea Life Center photographing a razorbill auk. 2 lights, a light tent, and working in the back area of the aquarium. And so photographing all kinds of things, from butterflies, like this tiger swallowtail butterfly. And I heat with wood. And so sometimes when I pull the bark off a piece of wood, I find cool things like this red flat bark beetle. It is in fact very red, and it is in fact quite flat, almost as thin as a paperclip, and it lives its entire life under the bark of trees. Or birds, the songbirds are amazing, like this blue jay, the color, the detail, the structure. Or here you see a cedar waxwing. This is a typical bird book shot. And there is a bad feather day. So I had a lot of animals in ponds and vernal pools that I was photographing, like this mole salamander called a spotted salamander. Now this is my high-key curious critters photography. This is the kind of photography that I had been doing prior to this, showing the natural backgrounds. So in the springtime, during the first warm rain, these salamanders migrate to vernal pools. They crawl out from under the leaf litter, out of their burrows, and head down to the pool. So you can see all kinds of details of the environment and the rainy night and things like that. But if you look at the curious critters images, I would suggest you see something different. With the white background, I think it makes the colors, textures, and shapes stand out better. In addition, I think it makes their personalities stand out. Now, I know scientists say they're not sure whether animals have personalities or not, but since they don't know, I say, hey, let's do it. Now, here's my question. Doesn't this salamander look like it's smiling to you? So I had collected 100 or so of these images, and so Sigma and I put together an exhibit, much like the one out here in McCaw Hall, where we put 24 images together and showcased them at the Telluride Photo Festival. Now, I walked into the gallery, and I stayed like a fly on the wall listening to people as they came in, and they were giggling, and they were laughing, and they were excited, and it was so much fun. And I went over and introduced myself to people, and they said to me, one after another, you have a book of these, right? Well, I didn't. And then they said, this would make a great children's book. So on the flight home from Colorado, I started thinking about what this book could look like. And I started imagining, what would my book look like out there with other children's literature titles dealing with nature? Whether it's The Lorax by Dr. Seuss or The Very Hungry Caterpillar by Eric Carle or others. And so I started in 2010 Wild Iris Publishing to control the product and produce something that would help strongly connect children's love of nature with literature. And so we took my designs, my draft cover, and I hired a designer who'd worked for Dorling Kindersley, who took my draft designs of the pages and made something much more polished. And so in 2011, my book came out, Curious Critters. And when I wrote these pieces, I tried to give each animal its own voice, like the Virginia opossum, who is a poet. So you have Ode to Opossum by O Possum. And then I tried to mix in scientific principles so that children would learn about science along with having fun. So this 2-page spread is all about coloration. On the left, you see the gray tree frog, who's clearly not gray. And on the right is a rare color morph, a pink katydid. Most katydids are green. And here I tried to put together 2 nocturnal mammals that fly. And when I wrote them, I tried to characterize them so they each had their own voice. So the southern flying squirrel, now I'm going to read this to you, but if you aren't familiar with a southern flying squirrel, this is a high energy animal. I'm talking so much high. Imagine a child who's eaten an entire Easter basket of candy in 5 minutes. So here is the southern flying squirrel. Yes, I can fly. Just a second. Okay, I spread my legs. Wait, yes, I'm a bit jumpy, jittery. Owls hunt me, you see? So I climb a tree, go out on a limb, and jump. Flaps of skin between my legs. I spread them. Then I gracefully glide. Sleep? Me? No, never. Well, okay, during the day, inside a hollow tree, gotta fly. Bye. So that's the southern flying squirrel with its staccato sentences, short sentences to mimic that high energy. And then the big brown bat responds, gliding. The little squirrel calls that flying. It's more like a long leap. I can really fly. And then he goes on to describe how he flies with his fingers with skin spread across him like wings. So in the back of the book, we put more information about the animals so that parents or older readers could get information. For example, how much does a big brown bat weigh? Well, about the weight of 3 U.S. quarters. And then it was my wife, Olivia, who was a naturalist, stay-at-home mom now, but also a librarian, who said, we should try to show the relative sizes of the animals. Now, against a white background, it's hard to gauge the size of the animal. But on the 22 by 9.5 2-page spread, that's 22 inches wide, 9.5 inches tall, each of the silhouettes fit life size. And so we turned it into a game. Children try to figure out which animal is which. They try to figure out the coloration patterns in the back of the book. We reversed some of the silhouettes to get them digging back through the book and see which ones got switched. And we changed one of the silhouettes. So when this book came out, it was dedicated to my first 2 daughters, Sarah and Phoebe. Now, when Sarah was born, I had a dream. I thought, how cool would it be if I could write a book that I could read to my own kids? And so I ask you, what are your dreams right now? What would you like to do? This started as a very small project, a few photos for an advertising campaign, and now I had a chance to fulfill one of my dreams. In fact, I always wanted to be a writer, and so here I am fulfilling 2 dreams. Here I am reading to my own daughters as an author. What greater thing could you have than that? And so when the book came out, even before it came out, it won a National Book Award. We won 6 National Book Awards, including the IBPA's Best First Book, all small publishers for children and young adults. And so with that feather in our cap, I went to Scholastic, and I said, would you guys be interested in carrying Curious Critters? And Scholastic right away signed it up for the book clubs and book fairs. And to date, we have sold over 100,000 copies of Curious Critters. That means that my book about nature is connecting children to the world around them. So if a book does well, what do? Well, you write another book. So I started Curious Critters Volume 2. Here is the American alligator from the Jacksonville Zoo who is practicing bellowing. And then there is the 9-banded armadillo who says, Buenos dias, amigos. Yo soy un armadillo. That means I'm a little armored one. Mixing culture and geography and all kinds of interesting things, not just natural history. Or the Sidewinder here, found in the desert Southwest. Now, as I was trying to figure out how to write this piece, I thought, what kind of profession would you have if you're disappearing all the time? I mean, look at his head. It disappears against his body. And imagine how hard it is to see him against the sand. What would your profession be if you disappeared all the time? Hocus pocus, rodents focus. Each and every day I perform my wild desert magic. Here's my routine. Wiggling into the sand, I vanish from view, disappearing from unsuspecting rats and mice. Only my eyes and the top of my sandy-colored body show. When midday prey scampers my way, presto changeo! I transform dry sand into Sidewinder alakazam. With a flash of fangs, the illusion is over. Simsalabim. The trick is blending in. Now you might think 50 to 75 words in a 32-page book, that doesn't take a whole lot of time to put together, but every word counts. I consulted a 1,000-page compendium of magician's terms to get this one just right. And then I ended the book with another scientific principle. So we have the striped skunk who has another poem, Limerick by S. Skunk. My skunk reputation's maligned. On bees and small rodents I dine. And that spray that you fear coming out of my rear, I think odoriferously fine. And responding to this is the great horned owl, who, by the way, is the only natural predator of the striped skunk. He's the only natural predator, scientists say, because apparently they can't smell very well. So we kept up the same formula from the first book, more information about the animals. We kept the life-size silhouettes in the back of the book, except this time we left one silhouette off. Now you're going to have to pick up a copy of the book to figure out which one. And so this book is dedicated to our third daughter, Annabelle, and to my wife, Olivia. Now, at the same time I was working on this book, I started the hardest project I've done yet, Curious Critters Marine, photographing underwater animals using this high-key approach. Like the giant Pacific octopus here that took 3 days to get the photograph for the cover of the book. The roseate spoonbill. I sent one of my light tents to Florida, to the Palm Beach Zoo, and they trained the spoonbill to jump up into the light tent. So when I got there, boop, it hopped right in and was ready to go. Or this American blue lobster. Only 1 out of every 2 million lobsters is born blue. Or the California sea cucumber, the tufted puffin. Now that cucumber, if he gets bothered, if a predator comes at him, he bursts his internal organs out, blows them out of his body, and believe it or not, he can regrow them and live just fine as he did before. Again, we put more information in the back of the book, more information for readers, and then the silhouettes. Now look at how big these animals are. If you look at the left side, you can see the bill, just the bill of the roseate spoonbill. Again, 9.5 inches. In addition to this, our latest project is introducing Curious Critters board books to get the youngest readers connected with nature. And so just last month, we introduced Michigan and Ohio, and this spring we're bringing out Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, Texas, and Florida. And if I didn't mention your state, stay tuned. We've got more coming. So the work I'm doing connects to the work of Richard Louv and others in the children and nature movement. Now, Richard Louv is the one who coined the term nature deficit disorder, which describes what happens to us, the cost if we are not connected with nature. But we don't have to be separated from nature. David Sobel in his book Wild Play talks about, in my area, how parents should read animal stories to their children, but other ways we can connect children to nature. And so that's what my wife and I do. We get our kids out, whether it's wintertime, or loading them down with backpacks and heading out, finding mushrooms, and of course, picking a few so we can eat them. Catching wild animals like this little mole, or finding scarlet tanagers, green anoles, or the lubber grasshopper. So I take my children out into nature, one generation to another, just like my father takes my child out into nature. But it's not just about families. It's about reaching out to other people in nature, getting parents and their children in your community connected to nature. You photographers out there have a great opportunity to teach people how to take pictures of the world around them, to go out into nature and demonstrate the techniques so they then can start sharing their pictures with other people. Take your specialized equipment out, show them how it's done. Bring them into nature, because we know things are different out there, but they don't have to stay different. We can help connect children to their innate love of nature. So, use your skills, start your projects, and get people out there wild snapping. Thank you very much.